Do you think I'm spooky? This is the first question asked by Agent Fox Mulder upon meeting one of his new partners, Agent Dana Scully, in his basement office of the FBI. In Season 1, Episode 1 of The X-Files, we learn that Mulder is a believer, someone who focuses his research on aliens, ghosts, monsters. Scully, his new partner, is a skeptic. She doesn't want to mess with all of that. She is firmly grounded in science. They shouldn't work together, but throughout the entirety of The X-Files, as well as a reboot and a movie, they create a partnership that ends up meaning more than both of them could have ever imagined. By reaching out and trying to understand, Scully and Mulder's relationship grew stronger. But okay, that's 90s television. We don't really take that too seriously here, so let me just backtrack. Let's go a little bit further back in time and talk about something more literary. Let's talk about Frankenstein. In chapter 15 of Frankenstein, the monster says, "My heart yearned to be known and loved by these amiable creatures," talking about humanity. And then later on in chapter 16, he says, "I am alone and miserable. Man will not associate with me." This is when he is pleading for the doctor to create him a mate, someone who will bridge the gap and understand him for who he truly is. Mulder and Frankenstein are both ostracized from society. Mulder in his basement office and Frank out in the wilderness. Mulder desperate for Scully to understand him. Frank desperate for a mate to be created. Now, let's get a little bit personal. Hi, my name's Dori. I am a child of divorce. I am also a queer kid who grew up in the South. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that it was really, really hard for me to find community in a world that seemed to only want to be around me when I was being anything other than myself. When I was around 12 or 13, I moved in with my dad full-time. My dad works for the film industry, which is really, really cool as far as getting exposed to alternative communities and ways of life that I might not have previously understood. But at the time, that was not my favorite thing about having a dad that worked in the film industry. My favorite thing was the movie recommendations. At my young age, I was watching movies that I definitely probably shouldn't have, anything from The Shining to Shawshank Redemption, all of the Indiana Jones films, but those weren't the ones that stuck with me. No, the one that stuck with me is Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow. Yeah, I know, probably not your first choice, but if you haven't watched it in a while, I do highly recommend it. It's got some absolutely gorgeous visuals. It's a retelling of a classic. It's truly just a beautiful piece of work. Those reasons, though, are not why that movie stuck with me. No, put all that aside. Didn't care about the cinematography. What mattered to me was Ichabod Crane. Ichabod was awkward. He didn't have a community. He was out of place in the world. No one really wanted him around. He was really just kind of trying to solve a murder. But most importantly to me, he didn't belong. I looked at his character walking across the screen and I said, "That's me. I understand him." And so I watched the movie over and over and over again until I felt like I belonged. And then it spiraled. From there, I fell in love with Sidney Prescott from the Scream franchise, Carrie from Carrie, Louis de Pontelac from Interview with the Vampire, the Gill Man from Creature from the Black Lagoon, Fox Mulder, of course, and Frankenstein's monster. All of these characters are people who are misunderstood, lonely, ignored, often blamed for things that are entirely out of their control. They're ridiculed, but they are doing their best, not just to survive, but to live. They're all monsters, overlooked by society, forgotten. They were all me. So I wanted more of this, naturally. I went online to try and find a horror community. I became a writer. I tend to focus my work on darker subject matter, ghosts, murders, scary things that people often want to push to the side because they don't want to have to deal with it. They don't want to have to think about it. But through my writing, I found a community. I wanted to process and understand how I felt through words, and other people were also trying to do the exact same thing. And the amazing thing was, None of these people cared who I loved or how I looked. All they cared about was telling a story, making good art. And that's the funny thing about the horror community, right? The blood doesn't have to be perfectly realistic. It can be neon red. The jump scares don't have to actually be good. You can see them coming from a mile away, or they can make you pee your pants in the theater because you never thought that might have happened. The acting can be Oscar-worthy, or it can be something more akin to sleepaway camp. It doesn't matter, because all of us are getting together and creating art through community. For the first time for me, being the monster was something to be celebrated, something not to look over, something that other people wanted to embrace. So, allow me to ask you a question. How many of you or your children have experienced anxiety or insecurity about something that you can't control or felt like you didn't belong? You don't need to tell me what it is, just like show of hands. Pretty much everyone in the room. Cool. Okay. So you yourselves have felt like the monster. You understand the horror movie protagonist, whether you want to or not. Now, how many of you were to look at Frankenstein's monster, or for a more recent example, Monstro Elisasu from The Substance, and react with revulsion or laughter or an immediate disgust? Get it away from me. Again, show of hands. Yeah. So you are judging the monster for things that it cannot control. Therefore, you are judging yourself for things you cannot control, and also judging your community for things that your community cannot control. Horror films are funny because they create a safe place for audiences to engage with and confront fear, which allows for a stronger understanding of it. When we are triggered by this fear watching a movie, instead of immediately reacting with revulsion or laughter or discomfort, why not stop and ask yourself why? Make the decision to engage with the discomfort of the unsettling, bridge the gap between fear and connection, and open your heart to the monster instead of immediately turning away. By listening to the stories of people in your community, stories that you might have overlooked or not wanted to deal with because it felt like it was outside of your purview, or by watching horror movies, we can acknowledge the monster's lived experience and take it in as our own. See pieces of ourself within Frankenstein. Scary Carrie becomes Carrie White, and we all become Sue Snell standing over her grave at the end of the movie, wondering just what went wrong. If the monster, Carrie, Frankenstein, any of them, had been shown empathy, how might their stories have been different? And if you showed yourself or your community empathy, how different might it look? The world is a scary place, and for the most part, people who are put into the position of a monster don't ask to be. None of those monsters wanted to be monsters. But by leading with empathy and learning to understand and accept the world around us, the scary movie becomes much less scary and much more comforting. The monster is no longer a monster. The monster is now a friend.